This is a video from way back in the old video files, about 2014 or so, back in the day. Back in my day, at least. Basically, I needed a bench vise, but I did not have much money. This was my first year in business for myself. This was the first shop that I got when I moved out of my mom's garage, finally. And so, needless to say, dropping $8,000 on, you know, like a used Wilton vise or something was just completely out of the question. And honestly, even spending $200, $300, $400 on like a cheaper commercially made bench vise would have really hurt. So I figured, hey, I'm just gonna build my own. I got a whole bunch of half-inch material. I cut this with a plasma cutter. I used my Hypertherm PowerMax 30XP, the smaller 30 amp unit. It still did it. I had to go slow to do it, of course. But it still did it, and like I said, this is going to be a fairly standard design for a bench vise, with the exception, of course, that this is made out of welded steel as opposed to cast iron. But, you know, spoiler alert, from the future, like 3+ years after I filmed this, it works great. I use this for everything. I used it for building stuff. I've used it changing U-joints on an F700 truck, and it's plain and simple held up great. So like I said, half-inch base plate. Most of the construction on this is out of just plain and simple half-inch steel. Now, originally, like I said, I gave it this base plate. I drilled some, I believe, about half-inch holes in this thing. I later got rid of this and mounted it on a receiver hitch, but more on that later on in the end of this video. And essentially, I just got this big piece of half-inch steel drops, and this is what I used to make most of this. Also, some like 1/4-inch wall tube here as well. Now, really, one of the only engineering challenges for this, so to speak, was this. This is what I refer to as the nut assembly. It's basically like a gusseted assembly, which the lead screw goes into, and it makes it so that when you're cranking down on the handle of the vise, you know, you're basically trying to pull the nut through this half-inch plate. You know, you're pulling it towards where the camera is now, through that hole. I also use some large washers as thrust bearings. It is redneck but effective. These are also hardened steel washers, so they'll probably last pretty much forever. There is a little bit of play in this. You do have to turn the handle like you know, a revolution and a half or 2 revolutions before the jaw on the vise starts to move away from the main body, which is a little bit of a downside, but you know what? You know, friggin' like $1's worth of washers at the hardware store, that's what I could afford, so that's what I did, and it works fine. Now, I had to get a little creative with building the rest of the body on this thing. Basically, just stuck it together once I had that mechanical portion of it down. I started building the jaw section for this thing. You know, I kind of wish that I could have milled, you know, these jaws after I built this thing, and, you know, the heat warped them a little bit from the welding. I kind of wish I could have milled these so they're perfectly, you know, parallel with each other. I guess theoretically I could now because I have a milling machine. Needless to say, my first year in business, I did not have a milling machine, so this is not an option, but it's never actually stopped me from using the vise for what I need to use the vise for. So if you're watching this thinking about building one of these and you don't have a mill and you're worried about it, my honest advice is just don't. Like I said, it hasn't actually caused me any problems. So this was a huge amount of welding. I used pretty much all 5/32 stick electrodes. You guys know that's one size up from the normal 1/8-inch variety stick electrodes. I ran these at about 160 amps, like 5/32, 7018. And it was just plain and simple, a lot of quality time just sitting there listening to some music, welding stuff out. It took quite a while, but I feel like it was a very sturdy design. Like I said though, and I talk a little bit more about this towards the end of the video in the update part, if I was going to build this again, I would probably try to do it with a wire feed process, and I'm not going to say I regret building the main body of this out of half-inch plate, but looking back at it now, knowing a little bit more about engineering, but still not much, I think this is probably a little overbuilt, like where I put probably 12 passes mounting this to the base plate. Yeah, 1, probably even 3 would be fine there, but you know what, it's really sturdy, so you know, still, I do like the idea of using half-inch plate for the actual body of the vise, like the part that's put under load regularly. So we got this all welded together. I spent some time cleaning this up. You know, I decided against painting this because I couldn't really decide what color I liked, and also I thought it looked really cool with, you know, the burned off mill scale and the bare welds there. So essentially all I did is I hosed this thing down with some clear coat to keep it from rusting. You know, I wire wheeled off as much of the spatter as I could, took an angle grinder with a flat disc and sanded down some of the corners, and in my opinion it worked out really well, and I think it looks really cool. All right, so this is the vise after several years. I think I built this in 2014. It is now very late 2017. Never once had one single problem with this thing. I've spray painted some stuff on it and tested some spray cans on it. Like I said, never once a single problem. It's in a slightly adapted roll. It had those flanges, which when I built this giant welding table, I cut the flanges off and mounted it on a hitch receiver so I can take it off the table if I really, you know, if I need every inch of this table and this would interfere with whatever I'm doing on said table. But it works great, never once a problem. Yeah, a lot of people, when they come in here, customers, friends, family, whatever, they're like, dude, did you build that bench vise? That's the coolest thing ever. You know, they're really thrilled with it. And I don't know, people seem to like it. It works flawlessly. I've used it for all sorts of stuff. I even used it mashing U-joints together on my F700 dump truck once, and it didn't break then. So it's really strong. It works great. Used it for several years. And for whatever it's worth, I highly recommend this project. It was a blast to put together. Took forever stick welding it. If I was going to do it again, I'd probably run some dual shield out of a wire feeder or something. But whatever the case, got it done. Still works great. Thanks for watching.